First, let me thank the Danish Institute of Military Studies for having me over to give this presentation. It's quite a humbling, also a learning experience. Also, giving me the opportunity to come to this Scandinavian city, you know, which is quite charming, because I've never had this sort of opportunity, you know, that I wish that I had. The second point I want to make is I'm trained as a political scientist, so I'll definitely take a very political scientist sort of approach to this issue, not as much as international law. Actually, the U.S. Naval War College currently has a conference on the Arctic issues, except it's very much focused on international law. A final point is about the sources. You know, our research is very much based on open source materials. Fortunately, we had the opportunity to travel to China a few weeks ago. We were able to acquire a lot of materials. We also had the opportunity to talk to some of the bureaucrats over there, you know, particularly this agency, what's the name? The State Oceanic Administration, which is the state agency that runs the polar research program. So it's a quite informative experience. For instance, this particular book, you know, the title is Chinese Sea Power, you know, which is written by a POA general. You know, it really talked about the Arctic issues and really helped to inform this presentation. As far as the contents are concerned, I'll focus on three issues. First of all, the evolution of Chinese Arctic interests, and secondly, trying to account for the change over time, you know, the drivers, the causes, and so on and so forth. Finally, the constraints. You know, these particular two photos, the cover as well as this one, you know, the Chinese cultural symbol of lions, you know, guarding the gate, you know, enhancing security, you know. So these are these are the Chinese research facilities established in the Norwegian territory of Svalbard, you know, because China is a signatory of that treaty, you know, was able to go there and rent the facility until very recently they decided to purchase the facilities, so they're going to stay there for long. As far as the evolution of Chinese Arctic interest is concerned, first of all, traditional interest is pretty narrow and technical. You know, focus on weather-related research. You know, Chinese Arctic, you know, research programs, you know, had made 3 trips to the Arctic region to do research. You know, basically, when you think about China, you know, for instance, I myself, I grew up in China. You know, I remember, you know, listening to radio, watching TV, you know, about particularly the weather change. You know, I remember, you know, the first is the Arctic cold current. Secondly, it's being enhanced by the Siberian cold current. You know, it's descending on China. You know, to the point, you know, at that point, the most thing that we thought about is to put on warmer clothes, you know, to stay warm, you know. So, you know, in terms of Chinese economy at the time, it was all agriculture. So in that sense, you know, we know that weather is very essential, you know, in terms of to what extent the crops, you know, grow well or not grow well or die, you know. So those are some of the issues that China was concerned about. Except for the past 5 to 6 years, you know, you begin to see a lot of literature, not just in terms of analytical literature, but also military literature on the Arctic issues. You know, specifically, you know, they focus on some of the newly emerging interests. You know, the first is the sea lanes. When we talk about the sea lanes, you know, there was a very good slide in the first presentation about the Northeast Passage as opposed to the sea lane that goes to the Suez Canal. You know, if you look at that map, that's a real good map. I hope I'll get that slide eventually. The Chinese interpretation is, basically you shorten the distance of transportation. Also, that relates to the cost of transportation, relates to economic growth and so on. Reduce the cost of production, the enhanced profit margin, that sort of analysis. So the idea is, you could lower the cost, the distance as far as 40%, and also the issue of security, the sea lanes, it's less costly, less congested, and also it's safer. If you think about Chinese naval deployment of warships up to the, whoops, I thought I had that slide. No, it's not there. But I'll eventually get to that slide. The point is, the reason China decided to deploy naval ships to escort the merchant ships in Gulf of Aden was because of the concern about the security of the ships, to the point China may have to lose the shipping market, share, because those are the concerns. So to sustain Chinese, proportion of the shipping share is important for the Navy to provide protection to Chinese ships transiting Gulf of Aden. So those are some of the reasons, and also an implication of that sort of shortened distance to ship goods and resources is the emergence of new areas of economic growth and prosperity. For instance, there is a particular discussion about China's northeast, the Manchuria, in the West, understood as Manchuria, that whole area, because the whole area used to be industrialized in the 50s by the Russians, to the point there are lots of Stalinist factories. They were all closed down. After '97, there is a tremendous economic depression in that region. But if you were able to find this. Shorter routes, to this tremendous market, in Europe, and also to the point you can combine that reduced cost of transportation with access to resources such as oil and gas, in the Arctic region. You marry both, then that's going to contribute tremendously to economic prosperity. Particularly if you look at that particular chart, the comparative cost of transit, except, you think about Chinese ports, not just in terms of Hong Kong, because Hong Kong only serves the Pearl River Delta. Shanghai ports are more important in terms of serving the Yangtze River Delta. And if you could, ship goods from the ports up north, such as Qingdao, Dalian, and as far as the Tumen River, because the Tumen River is interesting because that's the river that's blocked by the Russian territory. That's the triangle of Russia, North Korea, and China. So if China was able to release that piece of Russian territory to transit to the Sea of Japan, that's going to further reduce the cost of production. That's going to contribute to economic prosperity in that area. So these are some of the thinkings. Other than that, the fishing is also an increasingly important issue in the Chinese thinking about this issue. Because if you look at the South China Sea, East China Sea, and the Yellow Sea, the fishing stock is so depleted to the point they had to impose a moratorium, in terms of fishing. So North Pole could be a region where, new fishing stock would serve Chinese interests.